While some people answer phone calls without hesitation, something very different happens inside you. The screen lights up, a name appears, and before you consciously decide what to do, your body reacts first. A subtle tightening in your chest, a quiet resistance, a pause that feels heavier than the moment deserves. You're not busy. You didn't miss the call. You're just not ready. And almost instantly, a familiar question surfaces in your mind. Why do I hate this so much? It's not panic. It's not fear. It's something quieter, more internal, harder to justify out loud. Most people never question phone calls. They treat them as neutral, normal, necessary. So when you hesitate, when you let the phone ring, when you feel relief choosing text instead, it's easy to assume something is wrong with you. Maybe you call it anxiety. Maybe you label yourself socially awkward. Maybe you've been told that avoiding phone calls means you're immature, distant, or afraid of real connection. But what if none of that is true? What if hating phone calls has very little to do with fear and much more to do with how your mind processes control, timing, and mental space? Because talking on the phone isn't just talking. It's being pulled into someone else's rhythm without preparation. It's being expected to respond before your thoughts feel complete. It's thinking out loud with no room to edit. And for certain minds, that doesn't feel natural. It feels invasive. Here's something rarely acknowledged. Many people who hate talking on the phone are actually very good communicators. They write clearly. They think deeply. They choose words carefully. They understand nuance. Communication was never the issue. The issue is the format. Phone calls remove distance. They remove silence. They remove the ability to organize your inner world before sharing it with someone else. Messages offer space. Space to reflect. Space to regulate emotion. Space to respond instead of react. Phone calls collapse all of that into a single demand. Be present now. When the phone rings, your nervous system has to work instantly to code tone, track meaning, manage pauses, regulate your voice, stay socially available, all at the same time. For a reflective mind, this isn't effortless. It's cognitively expensive. So the resistance you feel isn't weakness. It isn't avoidance. It's your mind recognizing a mismatch between how it naturally works and what the situation demands. And once you understand that, the story you tell yourself about phone calls and about yourself begins to change. There's another layer most people never consider. People who dislike phone calls often have a strong need for internal predictability, not routine in the traditional sense, but cognitive stability. They function best when they can anticipate the flow of interaction before stepping into it. Phone calls disrupt that. They arrive unannounced. They carry unknown emotional tone. You don't know if the conversation will last 30 seconds or 30 minutes. Your brain prepares for every possible outcome at once. That constant preparation is exhausting. Not emotionally dramatic, just quietly draining. And your mind learns quickly which formats cost more energy than they're worth. This is why text feels safer, not because it's distant, but because it's contained. A message has edges, a beginning and an end. A phone call feels like an open door you didn't choose to walk through. There's also something else happening beneath the surface. People who hate phone calls tend to be highly self-aware. They notice subtle shifts. They track how they're being perceived. They sense when something feels off, even if they can't explain why. During a phone call, that awareness turns inward. You start monitoring yourself, your tone, your pauses, your pace. You wonder if you're talking too much or not enough, if you sound interested, if you sound cold. The conversation doesn't just happen, it's analyzed in real time. For someone with this level of internal monitoring, a phone call becomes mentally expensive, not because the conversation is difficult, but because your attention is split between being present and observing yourself being present. This is why phone calls can feel strangely intimate and strangely invasive at the same time. Someone has direct access to your voice, your reactions, your timing, without the buffer your mind usually relies on. And here's the part that often creates confusion. People assume phone calls are more authentic, more human, more connected. But authenticity only exists where your nervous system feels regulated. If a format creates tension, The brain doesn't experience it as closeness. It experiences it as pressure. That doesn't mean you don't value connection. It means you value it under conditions where your mind can stay grounded. For some people, connection happens through shared silence, through writing, through presence without immediacy, through conversations that unfold instead of demand. Phone calls skip that unfolding. They compress interaction into a single channel, at a single pace with no pause button. So your avoidance isn't about disinterest. It's about self-regulation, your mind choosing the environments where it can function without friction. And once you see that clearly, another assumption begins to fall apart. Once judgment is removed, a clearer pattern starts to emerge. People who hate talking on the phone often relate to meaning in a different way. They don't find value in immediacy or constant availability. They find meaning in depth, coherence, and intentional presence. A phone call demands reaction. It rewards speed. It favors people who think externally, who process ideas while speaking. But not every mind is built for that. Some minds need to organize internally before releasing anything outward. When you're pushed to speak before you're ready, your words don't feel grounded. They feel unfinished, disconnected from what you actually meant. And even if the call goes well, something feels slightly off afterward. This is why many people who dislike phone calls replay them later, not because something went wrong, but because the interaction bypassed their natural thinking rhythm. Their mind didn't get the preparation it needs to feel aligned. There's a quiet contradiction here. People who avoid phone calls often care deeply about communication. They care about clarity, about accuracy, about being understood without distortion. They don't want to speak carelessly. They don't want to improvise meaning. They want their words to reflect their thoughts, not rush ahead of them. And that takes time. So when someone says, just call, it's easier, what they're really saying is, use a system that works for me. And your resistance isn't stubbornness. It's your mind refusing to abandon its own structure. For some people, avoiding phone calls is also a boundary, a way of protecting attention in a world that constantly demands immediate access, a way of saying, I don't have to be instantly available to be valuable. That's not avoidance, that's discernment. Yet many people carry shame around this preference. They force themselves into calls they don't want. They apologize for not answering. They explain themselves as if something needs to be justified. But preference doesn't require permission, especially when it's rooted in how your nervous system stays regulated. Your brain isn't broken because it resists constant verbal access. It's calibrated differently. It prioritizes internal coherence over external speed. Some people regulate through stimulation, through constant interaction and shared energy. Others regulate through quiet processing, reflection, and control over timing. Neither approach is superior. They're simply different strategies for staying functional. Once you see this clearly, the internal dialogue begins to change. You stop asking, why can't I just be normal? And start asking, what environments allow my mind to work at its best? That question is subtle, but it's powerful. Because when you honor how your mind actually functions, communication stops feeling like performance. It stops feeling like something you have to survive. It becomes intentional, grounded, and honest. So the next time your phone rings and you feel that familiar resistance, pause before judging it. Notice what your mind is asking for in that moment. Space, timing, control, stability. You don't hate talking to people. You hate being pulled out of your internal alignment without warning. And that doesn't make you distant. It makes you precise. You're not avoiding connection. You're choosing the forms of connection where your thoughts, your tone, and your sense of self stay aligned. That alignment matters more than immediacy ever could. And maybe that's the real edit your mind has been trying to make all along.